Hey, good morning, everyone. Welcome to the webinar. My name is Pat Shui. I look after solution engineering for Imperium for Asia Pacific and Japan. So this morning, I'm pretty excited to share with you the mobile threat landscape and quick update on what the trend looks like in our region in Australia and New Zealand. Before I get started, I wanted to start with the two housekeeping items. First of all, this session has been recorded. So for anyone who cannot attend, or if you wish to send it to other colleagues within your organization, you'll be emailed the link after the session. Now, the next one is that I'll be presenting on a single screen today by myself. So for any question that you have during the content that I've presented, for any queries, please put the questions in the questions box within the BrightTalk window. And I'll take a look at the end of the session as I go through the content, and I will I'll review them and share the response with you. Anyway, without further ado, welcome to the webinar around mobile threats. Let's get into it. As we reach to the end of the 2022, right? It's been I would say, pretty interesting last couple of years. And what I sort of realized when I talk to many of the customers in the region is that while we're opening up, while the businesses are going back to usual, we are relying heavily on this notion of mobile devices and mobile application. So this is an interesting quote, and it's kind of the analogy I want you to sort of think about as we go through the presentation. Yeah. So as the banks, in the, I think this is early 2005, when they were opening more banking branches to support more of the users so they can accessing banking services in America, it increases the targets for bank robbers. And this is a quote from FBI back in 2006. So now if we think about the digital and the mobile world, we are actually no different, right? The item, the fact the bank branches might be different now. It's all digital, it's all virtual, it's all for mobile apps, right? So the attack target, while people are moving from a physical brick and mortar shops, they are now targeting devices where users are performing their transactions, their services online, right? And this doesn't just apply to banking. I think banking is a great example. It's simple for people to understand. And today, I think there are some agencies and government attendees on the call today. As you digitizing your e-services, identity, paying, fines, etc., your shop front is also now a target. So now let's get into some of the high-level data just to help everyone understand what are the risks within the mobile landscape, right? And this is the data that Imperium published earlier this year, right? It's part of our global threat report, and this is based on over 80 million devices that are using our solution to protect their mobile devices with their consent, right? And data are normalized. So we actually can get a very good insight around the threat and how it's evolving over time, right? So from the mobile device standpoint, there are four areas of we can consider as attack vector, or you can think of it as an entry point, how those bank robber can try to get into your application, your device. Yeah, so device network phishing apps. So if you look at devices within 2022, we have seen an increase of almost 500% in zero-day vulnerability in the wild, right? So these are combination of iOS and Android vulnerabilities, right? Most of you might think, right, these are mostly Android. It's not so critical, but the facts might scare you, right? As I move on to the next slide, I'll share a little bit more detail. But devices are ultimately, running operating system, their software, they're vulnerable to bugs and issues. And just like your Windows and Mac, computers, there can be exploited when there are bugs such as this. And we're seeing, increasing numbers of that, right? Most commonly, if you look at the end users today, they don't always update their devices to the latest version, right? Even when it's available. And most of the time, the devices might not even be allowed or support the newer operating system as the technology and software updates evolves. So that's a very concerning number. Now, network. Let's look at, what does that actually mean? Because your mobile phones are always connected to something, right? It's whether your 4G, 5G network, but a lot of the time you are also connected to Wi-Fi network when you're at home, when you're, in your offices or traveling, perhaps. So we see network attack as a very common way, and it's essentially zero customer interaction required on the mobile phone. So your mobile phone would automatically discover open network, and you automatically connect to network that it's known or connected before, right? For instance, those free Wi-Fi that you've ever connected on your phone actually remembers them. And then next time when you're not connected to any Wi-Fi, you will try to connect. So we've seen 20% of enterprises devices that are actually experience attack, right, through their mobile network connections. So again, that number is consistently high. And as we sort of move from a remote working at home to more of a physical meeting these days, the numbers is expected to increase. Now, phishing, it's I don't think I have to explain too much about what this is. I think we all get them. We get them multiple every day. In fact, we were talking to some of the customers, particular in Australia, in the last, I would say, 6 months. Most of their concerns are actually related to phishing, the fact that the user are getting bombarded with, not just SMS, emails, right? Even from their social media application like Facebook Messenger, WhatsApp, right, Telegram. They actually, are vulnerable to clicking those links, and those links can result in compromise of the account. Ultimately impacts the enterprises and your data and your customers' data, right? So we have seen increasing website or phishing site designed for mobile application or mobile devices only, meaning that if you take the same URL, right, the link on your computer, on the browser, it doesn't actually render very nicely. But on your mobile phone, it renders perfectly as if it's designed for mobile, right? So that just shows you the attackers are focusing mobile devices as a target. Last but not least is around apps, right? So 42% of organization actually reported there are unauthorized apps or apps that are accessing, enterprise data. Let's take some example, right? We all use our mobile devices for work. There are numerous apps that we have installed. And let me ask you what permission does those apps have access to? Do you know what are the potential risks, right? For instance, an app can ask for access to photo album, right? Camera rolls. You take a photo in a meeting, and the next thing you know is that photo of your meeting minutes or architecture design or some ideas that you're about to launch. Next thing you know is on an application's server outside of your location. There's a lot of these type of data leakage risk. Even we have seen example of a malicious app or risky app that have access to your copy and paste buffer on your mobile phone, right? We all know, right? We copy and paste information that's important between apps, right? Passwords, sometimes OTP tokens. Imagine there's apps that's sitting there just reading those information and then sending it out to the server, right? Harvesting those sensitive information. So just very high level view of these risks. And as we monitor enterprises and mobile devices across the region, globally as well as in Australia, these are some of the insights. So now let's spend more time digging into the regional data, right, shortly. But let me go on and just talk about this 0-day data that I've shared earlier, right? So as you can see here, since 2015, we've been tracking the 0-day vulnerability on the mobile operating system, right? 2021 is a very interesting, kind of like an outlier. So there's about 18 zero-day that's being discovered on the mobile operating system. Okay, so that essentially represents 1 in 3. So if you think about, your laptop you're using, your other, devices that you have in your household, right? 1 in 3 zero-day, they are accountable or responsible on the mobile devices, right? So that number is significantly being increasing. And remember the question that I posed earlier, right? Most of you guys would probably think this is Android only. Hey, don't give me iOS is secure, isn't it? The reality is that 65% of the data across all the way back to 2015, there are actually iOS specific zero-day vulnerabilities. And in this year, in 2022, 7 out of the 9 that is listed here on this bar chart are responsible or originated on iOS platform, right? So that just again shows that targeting, the trend, as well as how the security landscape has evolved, right? So the note, mental note for everybody is that if you have an iOS device or Android device, make sure you always update your software to the latest version, right? Because it actually helps. And using the house analogy or the bank, branching analogy, don't leave the window open, right? While you lock the door, make sure the windows are locked as well, so that people cannot get in, right, through other means. Okay, so continue on. I think another thing that has been concerning many of the enterprises is this notion of a spyware. We have seen, the very well-known spyware, Pegasus. I presume everybody have heard of. Of course, a lot of the user or enterprise professional that I talk to, they always tell me, hey, Pat, that is a state-sponsored, very high-profile kind of attack. It's not going to happen to me, so I'm not that worried. But if you look at here, right, the spyware as a market or as a risk has also been commoditized. What I mean by that is that there are actually lots of application that's been developed similar to the SaaS platform that we consume. They're offering that to users who wants to leverage this kind of service. It's not just targeting at government, right? They're even harvesting information on users' credential on Facebook. We have seen example, targeting different type of user, demographics and populations. I recall that earlier this year or late last year, we've discovered even a spyware campaign that is targeting at South Korean citizens, right? By using some sort of social media application to really track what they do. And these days spyware can really see everything that you're doing on your phone, right? Imagine you had access to your camera, you can turn it on without you knowing, microphones, and more things that are quite scary, reading your SMS, taking screenshot, etc. So the idea here is really to have ability to understand and assess this risk, right? And really the question that I want you guys to all think about is, how would you know, right, if some of these network, phishing related issue apps, whether even, if you have spyware installed on the device already. Okay, so moving on, I think, just one more quote before we get into the data specific to Australia. We, as Imperium, we've actually worked very closely with Google as part of our, contribution to the security ecosystem. And, during the Google Threat Analysis Group, right, they also made a statement around, hey, the fact that the capability of the mobile phone is so attractive for the actors, right? If I can compromise, for instance, a prime minister's laptop, what I might find is that he's not in front of the laptop. He's not doing anything on it. If I can compromise the same person's mobile device, then I have the ability to then know where he is, turn on the microphone to hear what he's talking about, not just the location, but understand who he's meeting, what are the context of some of the conversations and messages, right? So that's really why mobile is now an attractive target, where it's the, according to Verizon is the most unprotected vulnerable devices in your enterprise today. Okay, so now let's take a look at some of the threat data, right? So as I mentioned, as part of our global threat intelligence, with the customer's consent, we collect anomalized threat telemetry that can be used for understanding of the threat landscape and help protect the organization and the ecosystem of the users better, right? So these dots and the size of the bubble represents essentially the density, and the color represent the type of threat. So we sort of broken this down for Australia, from 2020, from this early beginning of the year till now. These are the type of threat that we have detected or seen, right, across the user base. So, you can see network related scan, main in the middle, the blue color and green color, they're pretty prominent, right? So remember, as I mentioned, to compromise a network or to trick the user to connect to a network is actually quite simple. And that's usually a common way of starting an attack, because it doesn't actually require user to do anything, right? So we've seen that. We also seen, quite pockets of, if you look at Sydney areas, Melbourne, and even Perth, there are a number of orange dots that represent the compromised device, right? So compromised devices actually is a generic term that doesn't just mean that the device is rooted or jailbroken, right? So the device could, being exploited with one of those, 0-day, or not even that advanced, right? Maybe an end day, which is already being discovered, being found, potentially the exploitations open source on the internet somewhere, maybe perhaps on the dark web. Someone takes advantage of that and weaponize the exploit to result in compromising and gaining privileged access on mobile devices, right? So that it's usually quite concerning that the percentage is generally low. But when it happens, it means that essentially what you think your device is yours is really no longer under your control, right? Because the attacker can do a lot more. We have seen examples of darker color around malware, right? So we've seen some instances of malware across the major cities, and danger zone encounter. Essentially, a set of threat intelligence data that we have based on the Wi-Fi SSID that has been attacked previously. We are able to tell you that, hey, this access point is actually vulnerable to attack. We know it because we have seen attack previously. And if you're connecting to this network, your chances of getting attacked are higher, right? So, really the detection and the data really trying to broken down into risk versus actual threats, right? So that's the kind of a breakdown. Now, as we go into zoom into Sydney, right? So I've got, I think, four different cities. You can see, quite a staggering increase in the device compromises data. So I think what this really tells you, right, is that our devices are vulnerable. They are actually everywhere, and the question is that is your device safe or secure, and how would you know, right? Because if you are your enterprises have implemented or deployed MDM solution, mobile device management solution, and even a lot of the enterprises today are moving away from device management to MAM, right? Application management, containerization. It still doesn't give you that level of assessment and confidence whether the device is in the safe, secure operating state, right? While the checks for jailbreak and routing is there, it actually are very focused around signatures. It doesn't give you the ability to detect advanced and more, attacks that are perhaps not in the signatures today, right? So these kind of data point gives you an insight. So you can see in certain areas there are big bubbles of main in the middle attack, right? So usually this data, if you were an enterprise that subscribed to our service, you're able to actually go into the detail of those attack and understand what are the SSID that was under attack, right? And what are the vulnerable, perhaps the user who is using the, within your enterprise, the services, also the type of attacker and their, forensic data around perhaps malware hashes, etc. So those are really useful as part of your threat hunting and your SOC operations. Okay, so moving into Melbourne, going down south, you can see there's less data, like points here. There's still a consistent, device compromises across the city, right? There are quite a numerous of network scanned as well, right? So scan is usually the beginning of something, right? If I have detected a reconnaissance scan within the network, that is indicator of someone on the network is looking for things, right? For targets, understanding what ports open, what vulnerability perhaps are there on the devices, so they can launch the next attack, right? So that's again, quite an important visibility to have across your enterprises and your mobile devices that the networks are connected to. Okay. Now let's moving to Brisbane. So I think people at Bris Vegas, they can see there are more scans, right? Which is consistent across the board. There are less compromises and malicious link or sites, but we have seen a cluster of area, which is interesting in this location, that has excessive malware been detected, right? So that usually can indicate a malware campaign that are targeting an organization, a particular set of users in that location, or it could be one of the bad actor who is trying to infect as many people, right, around the location by compromising perhaps, right, network, and pushes down the malware to user's device. Okay, so the last one I wanted to share is Canberra. So yeah, our federal state, right? And as we see, right, these state sponsor and lots of risk and threat around political users and users within the different locations and perhaps their roles. We can still see very consistent picture in Canberra compared to other cities as well, right? So something again, right, to note that these kind of visibility are important. And when we do, if anyone who's interested in understanding some of these data a bit more, we have a dedicated threat research team and labs that can help digging into some of these threat details. We can also share with you threat, the map of the view or the threat landscape over time and see how that evolves, right, based on certain events. We actually did one for the Tokyo Olympics, back in 2020, to show that how the attack was focusing around certain timing and certain location, and even along the trend line we can see consistently man in the middle attack, like the green dots around how the population travels to events, right? So that's quite an interesting data set. Okay, so before we wrap up, I wanted to also share with you some real compromises that we have detected, right? So we've got an example for iOS and another example for Android, right? And this particular compromise of malware is done through a compromising of the network, right? So you can see here the locations in the United States based on the iPhone 10, running a fairly old operating system, which is not uncommon. We've seen probably around 20-30% of our user base still running a fairly old version. And if you go to the CVE website, you can see, right, over probably 1,000 CVEs are dedicated to this version of the OS, right? So what was happening in our this particular scenario is that the user obviously using our solution, monitoring and securing their device, connected to unsecure Wi-Fi, and within 15 seconds, right, they visited a malicious website, right? So we know when the network is compromised, you can essentially control where the users are going. So in this example, the attacker was able to basically tunnel or push the user to this malicious website, and at the same time, the TLS traffic is being downgraded. So any HTTPS related content are not encrypted, and through there, malicious content was downloaded, a suspicious IPA. So essentially, a iOS app was then installed onto the device, and we flagged it and detected that particular behavior. Right. So this really illustrate, right, the attacker doesn't just try to get you with one thing, right? They will always try to find ways to get to your devices through various different mechanisms out there, right? And this visibility really provide you and some security assurance around what's going on your devices as you are using and accessing important information. The next example is actually based in Turkey on an Android device, a Xiaomi device. So relatively similar. It's a network related. We detected a scan that was happening on the network that the device is connected to, and there is basically a man-in-the-middle attack within the 3 minutes that the user connected to that network or being scanned because they're being identified. SSL strip technique was applied. Again, this is to making sure that the content that the users are using are not encrypted anymore, so downgrading the SSL or the security on the network. An application is siloed to the device, meaning that they actually got a APK file pushed to the device through that network connection and the browser link, and then a malware is then detected, right? This all happened within the 10 minutes of them being discovered on the network, and a very different technique is being applied. So I think hopefully this gives you a good flavor of insight around the threat data in the region, as well as what's happening globally. I wanted to sort of finish one of the last content here before I go into some of the recommendation. Right, the Verizon Mobile Security Index is actually a very well published report that's done yearly. And for the very first time, mobile is being considered as a critical component within the organization. If we think about us, right, like related to our day-to-day life, we have perhaps a mobile phone for sure, maybe a tablet, and then maybe a laptop where I'm presenting to today, right? So out of the 3 devices, 2 out of 3 are actually mobile, and they're actually not, they've perhaps been managed by some sort of device management, but they are not secured, right? The same way as you have done on your laptop, with not just antivirus, but EDR solutions that looks at behavior anomaly. You have traffic monitoring and proxies that looks at malicious content and URLs and etc. So a lot more security control has been applied on your laptop than the mobile devices that you have, which is essentially 60% of most of the user base, which is left not secured or do not have the same visibility that you have on your laptop. All right, so mobile is really critical. That's the sort of key takeaway. Now, I wanted to just finishing off the rubber, the bank rubber example. Essentially, if you have a mobile device that's not secured, it's an analogy like you have a very secure vault that you have built. You store very important things in there. However, the vault door is open, right? And if you can imagine you're developing application for your end user to use, right? Whether they're insurance, they're banking, they're government services. If you build a very secure app, but that app is running into a device that's compromised, right? That is in a very risky state. When the vault door is open, nothing is actually secure anymore, right? So really, what we are trying to emphasize here is that visibility monitoring, you don't know what you don't know, and visibility and protection is the first step before you can take any proactive action. Now, I do have a couple of takeaway points, right, before we wrap up the webinar today, right? So I wanted to start with this notion. I was reading a Ghana article, which was the security prediction for 2023, right? And one of the analysts have actually identified that zero trust architecture being a very important part of the security, managing security in general, but particularly for mobile threat. Trusting the device is no longer enough, right? You need to validate if the device, whether it's not jailbroken right now, it doesn't have malicious application, it's not connected to a compromised network, your traffic hasn't been manipulated or downgraded, right? So a list of behavior needs to be checked consistently to verify that if you, as a user on this device, are actually secure to accessing sensitive data and corporate information. Because if we don't do that, then that device becomes a leakage point or entry point for the attacker to take advantage. So it's not something it's not a simple solution, I would say, zero trust. It's a holistic view of looking at how you managing identity, device security, etc. And mobile security is key part of that architecture. Now, anti-phishing. So I've spoken to some of the federal agencies in Canberra this year, and one of their biggest headache, right, is really to provide some capability for the users when they receive SMSs, malicious link or a known link from random people that are able to validate and protect or check against that link, whether that's actually legitimate or it doesn't have a risk, right? But not just the link these days, right? Because we go to a restaurant, we scan QR code, right, for in order to order. We sometimes have to pay with them. We enter information, and those QR codes are a sticker that anyone can go and basically replace. And we have seen example across the region that these QR code led to scanning of a downloading of a malware or taking it to a fake spoof website to collect your credit card information. So you really need to have a much proactive way of analyzing and protecting against phishing, right? So it's no longer relying on user, teach them, train them about what to look for, because remember, 75% of the phishing website are targeting at mobile devices, right? Things are looking very, very difficult to decipher. And a good case study this year was the Twilio hack, right? The fact that the attacker was able to socially engineer SMS message that looks like a Twilio link to trick their employee to click on the link, which then compromises their system. And the impact was huge, right? Because not only them as a company was impacted, their partners and their part of the ecosystem, their customers were also infected. And that was all done through one phishing SMS. Okay. The third point is really, when we talk about an endpoint strategy, do not forget mobile, because remember, mobiles are 60% of your endpoints within the organization, right? There are still the least protected devices out there. So that would be a good starting point. The fourth point is around apps, right? So this is a reminder for any enterprises that builds application. A lot of the banking and government sectors are probably already pen testing the enterprise apps, right? The only question that often come up is, how often do you do it? And do you do it really when there are changes being introduced, or you do it once a year because of the compliance? So the idea here is really, there are so many third-party libraries, and there is this notion of a software bill of material, SBOM, right? Concept that now each application developers are creating a list of components and third-party library that's being used, to really understand the supply chain risk and really protecting how the data are being accessed, whether data are being leaked through one of the SDK that you are using within your mobile app. Perhaps it's a QR code scanner, and that SDK takes that QR code, translate that to link, sends it to their server without you even knowing, right? So these are the type of example that could happen within the enterprise app that you build, that just because you don't have access to source code of those library that you're using, right? Something important and something that we can definitely discuss with anyone who's interested and concerned about how to protect and secure their enterprise apps. The last thing is around, if you have MDM and if you have MAM, if you feel that is a secure enough scenario, think again, as many of our customers not only, in fact, if you look at Imperium global customer base, most of the customers actually has MDM solutions already, and they're still adding a capability, mobile threat defense, on top of that. Even they're using the MAM container. There are also a lot more adoptions in terms of endpoint security now on mobile, right? Simply because MDM doesn't really cover your network related risks, doesn't cover phishing protection for you, doesn't really cover those live behavioral detection that you need, right, to combat against the advanced threats out there. Okay, so that is all for the session that I have prepared. So let me just go back to the questioning here. So I've got two. Okay, so threat max and promote network attack compared to other country. Okay, so that's a great question here. So we've got one questions around more of a comparison about network attack across other countries, capital city, etc. So we do have those data. I would suggest, I don't actually have the name of the person who raised the question, but please reach out to me, Pat Schwed at Imperium.com, or I think there was some contact information there. But please reach out to me, and we can help provide more data or insight and some comparison. These are something that we do as part of our consulting, but we are happy to work with you and see what how we can help whenever possible. Okay, so how does jailbreak detection in an MDN like Incheon compare? That's a great question. So I would based on many customers testings and even pen testing application, one thing I would call out is that most of the MDM detection for jailbreak or routing are signature based. Think about the notion, right? Solutions like other MDNs, they put a list of 400, 500, 600 rules inside the application, and they check if the device is jailbreak, broken or rooted. And we know, right, in this world, the jailbreak technique and new technology or tools are being released on a weekly basis. So clearly, those apps are probably updated once a month, once every 2 weeks. So there's always a gap, right? You cannot catch up with those new techniques, right? So the way we address it is by applying machine learning and behavioral analysis. We are moving away from signature-based check. We are focusing around when a device is compromised, jailbroken, what does the impact of that look like? So we have a lot of a proven track record to detect zero-day exploitation and new jailbreak that has not been even identified in a while, right? Because we see that as a changes or impact to the operating system, and the risk is detected that way, right, through the use of signature. So what you're going to see is we are going to capture a lot more and without less update and prevent advanced jailbreak detection that some of the MDM doesn't pick up until a couple of months or even sometimes 6 months later. Okay, so there was, I think I'll take the last question here. How does Imperium handle mobile application vulnerabilities, right? So there are actually a couple of approaches that we take, okay? So the first approaches is that when you're developing application, we know there's this notion of DevSecOps, right? So you want to, as a developer, developing, we are providing capability of part of our platform to scan the application against vulnerabilities, also security related best practices, right? Whether you are handling SSL pinning, whether you have you using a vulnerable SDK, right, that has been reported previously to be exploited. So there's a combination of a scanning both statically, dynamically that we can provide, right? And this is on the binary level, not on the source code level. So very different to some of the tooling that you have already. Okay, and then once the application goes to the wild, we have capability to essentially monitor, because you can scan to your heart's content on the app, right? And they might come back with 0 issues and 0 vulnerability. As soon as it's released to the wild, the attacker finds ways to break your application, right? So we have the ability to embed our capability as an SDK into the mobile app, and it sort of works like a WAF, right, for your mobile app. So any attack or anything that tries to attack and break the application, we provide you detections and telemetries to tell you what's going on once the application is released, right? So it's more of a notion of runtime monitoring, similar to what App Dynamics and Dynatrace have for you guys for performance, but we do it for security, right? So we do it for pre-production through scanning, and as well as post-production through active monitoring. Okay, so now I think I've gone over a little bit longer than what we planned, but I do appreciate everyone's time and the questions that you have. The recording will be sent, and for I think the person who raised the questions around threat map comparison across country, across region, please reach out to me, and we can help provide you some more insight. All right, I would like to wrap this up. Thank you very much for your time, and looking forward speaking to you. And please stay safe in these upcoming festive seasons. Just remember that mobile devices are the vulnerable part of your ecosystem, and be safe. Cheers. Have a great day.